Hello and welcome to episode 19 of Strive, where we talk about security, technology, resilience and everything IT, all in a virtual environment. Well, after 18 episodes and 18 months of Strive, I'm very proud to announce that we're going to be making some changes here. We're going to be expanding Strive to bring you more frequent content, and now with a guest array of hosts from right across our technical leadership team. So today I'm excited to introduce the first of those guest hosts, Vidya Shankaran, who's a field CTO, an expert in everything AI strategy, post-quantum computing, and much, much more. From here on in, think of this as Strive Plus. Same quality insights, more often, and with the right expert for each of our topics. So I'll see you all again very, very soon. And in the meantime, Vidya, welcome to Strive.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Darren. I'm excited to host Strive podcast today. I'm Vidya Shankaran, field CTO at Commvault, and I would love to dive into the deeper end of the AI pool, so to speak, to understand and explore how AI is truly reshaping the way enterprises secure and govern data. Today, I'm joined by Eldad Chai, CEO and co-founder of Satori, to talk about the challenges and opportunities ahead of us. Thank you, Eldad, for the backstage chat last week. We talked about a lot of things. First and foremost, we talked about how the foundation of nearly all business decisions and business value is data. So securing it is the most logical thing to do. Protecting it is even more logical. And of course, governing access to that data repository has been a problem for a very long time. And interestingly, it continues to grow. That complexity of evolving nature of technology has been compounding to the existing challenges when it comes to governing access. So with so many point tools and solutions, there are way too many gaps. And this fragmentation has definitely created a real tangible risk for enterprises to solve for. Back to you, Eldad. I would love to understand, what problems were you hoping to solve for when you founded Satori, especially around data security?
Absolutely. And thank you for having me today. Really excited to have this discussion with you. When we founded Satori, the world we saw was pretty complex. It was extremely fragmented, both from a data perspective. Really, you've seen silos of applications with their backend databases supporting them. And then as a result of that, different types of silos in terms of security. Every application and every data store had its own security mechanism, procedure, etc. And then when organizations started to leverage more modern data architectures, with the promise of modern data and AI, they started building these uniform data lakes, huge repositories of data and huge data warehouses, leveraging technologies like Snowflake and Databricks and the different cloud providers. And they were encountering a new world. It's now not just this one application, one database with a tailored solution. They had to solve for multiple use cases, multiple applications, and multiple types of people accessing that data. That became a huge inhibitor for adopting all these cool data technologies. And when we saw that, our vision was, hey, if we can solve this, if we can simplify data security and data access specifically for these organizations, removing that friction while providing best-in-class compliance, security, and privacy, organizations are not just only going to be safer, they're actually going to win the data and AI race, because they're going to remove that friction that holds them back. So that's kind of the problem we saw, and we wanted to solve that with a uniform data security platform that both covers all your data wherever it resides, cloud and on-prem, and different types of repositories, AI and data, and also covers the data throughout its entire life cycle. So not just at one point.
Thank you so much. And I think I'd like to pick up on a specific, notion that you brought about, an idea, which is around different groups of people. And so basically, at this point in time, it's safe to assume that all enterprises have geographically distributed teams. And I would even venture to say that traditional notions of data access are no longer relevant anymore. But at the same time, I also wanted to chime in a little bit around how we are continuously seeing the evolution of identity management, policy enforcement. And I think they are definitely headed in the right direction, which provides, to your point, visibility, agility, that most of the old IAM models definitely struggle to deliver. Now, a more of a theoretical question to you, Eldad. What is at stake if enterprises chose not to modernize or did not modernize how they govern access to sensitive data? What is the worst case scenario that could happen?
In my eyes, the bigger, more important question is, where will I be in 5 years in this data and AI race if I do not figure out how do I secure data effectively? So it's not just secure data, it's doing that effectively in a way that's supportive to the business, enables the business versus added friction. There's a common saying in security, if you want to build the perfect security tool that solves all threats, new, existing, what have you, just block everything. That's the best security tool. No, nothing can come through, but that also kills the business. And throughout the years, security evolved from something that is there to say no to actually something that is there to say yes. How do we not block things, but actually put guardrails for employees, for partners, for developers to follow so they can do their job and we can be successful as a business, but we're also not violating any kind of compliance framework or putting the organization in risk. So I think that the first and foremost question organizations and leaders need to ask is where do they want to be in this data and AI race? And then, okay, how do we make that happen with security and compliance in mind? Because that's a given. We need to secure the business. We need to serve our customers in a responsible way. And then you need to think about, okay, what kind of technologies do we need? Do we go for the more old school traditional technologies that might solve the security problem but add a lot of friction? Or do we actually opt to the more modern, forward-looking models and technologies that allows us to run faster in this data and AI race? So I think that the business question is the one I would start with.
Lovely. I love that. Primarily because I think, again, to tap into one of the key aspects that you brought up, when AI is an enabler for our business, we should treat it as such. There's no point in blocking it to the point that it becomes detrimental to an organization where the users are not able to reap the maximum benefits of an AI implementation within their environment. Now, having said that, I think to a large degree, AI is a double-edged sword. It has made things easy, has made things hard for an organization. And from a compliance and governance perspective, the biggest challenge that AI today presents is where it's deemed more of a black box and auditing is definitely next to impossible. So where do you think Satori as a valuable differentiator comes in solving for that challenge?
When you really think about AI security, a lot of it is just data security. I want to know where is my data, who has access to it, and how it is it being used. I'm going to use that to govern, how the data is being used. I'm going to use that to generate compliance reports for my compliance reporting and auditing requirements. And I'm going to use that to govern general where data sits and who uses it. Yes, there are new challenges that AI introduce. Again, prompt injection is one, but for the most part, it is very common. The challenge with AI security, so I'm not saying it's easy, don't get me wrong, but the real challenge with AI security that it's new technology. You're talking about models, pretty much bare bones or applications with not a lot of security capabilities built in. Until recently, even just basic audit was really hard to achieve. And in many cases, it's just a black box. Now, securing a black box is pretty challenging. For specifically for Satori, AI and this challenge became an opportunity because one of the things we did very early on in when we went and evaluated the data security problem as a whole is we identified coverage as one of the key things we will need to solve. So a data security platform is as good as the databases and assets it covers. If it doesn't cover an asset, it doesn't really matter how advanced the features are. And we built multiple ways to integrate so we can have that very, very nice coverage. One of them, which is pretty unique in the space, is a transparent proxy, something that sits between the user and the database, or between the database and an API, in a very effective, efficient way, and can apply any kind of policies and visibility. And that fit really nicely within the AI model because, the model doesn't have any security APIs, but if you can sit between the user and the model, and also between the model and the backend database or vector database, you can apply the same capabilities, data classification, masking, access controls, auditing, with the same data security tools you had before. It fits into the same framework. It's just applied on a different type of interface. So that actually has become a very important tool and capability within the Satori set of capabilities. And we feel that jump between 0 to 80% is really impactful for businesses. That's where we focused on. And, with time, we'll solve the rest of the 20%. But definitely, we want to get organizations comfortable with AI as they're comfortable with their entire data security program.
Absolutely, 100%. And thank you so much for actually demystifying the way Satori actually functions, the way the policies are enforced. Because as a technologist, my interest was definitely piqued walking into this discussion with you here, Eldad. And I'm sure for the benefit of our larger audience that's watching this podcast would also benefit from how Satori actually makes a huge difference. And also one of the key things that I think I picked up as you were walking me through this is there was literally no mention of infrastructure. So the fact that you're able to abstract policies from the underlying infrastructure speaks to the volumes of agility and scale that you can possibly achieve with Satori. Would that be a fair statement to make?
Again, going back to my previous comment on what we had to solve for a really modern, agile data security platform, it was really like three things when you think about it. So one, which we already touched on, which is the coverage. So how do you decouple the capabilities that you need to provide as a data security platform from the underlying infrastructure? How do you not tie yourself to a specific database? And, proxy is one of them. We have native integrations for others, and we could deploy as a SaaS solution or on-prem. So really taking this notion of coverage, not as lip service, but really building the deep tech that's required to do that. But there's two more things you need to do to be able to actually address the actual business case. So you've integrated great. The second part is really this notion of addressing the data throughout its life cycle. So as you've seen fragmentation in terms of environments, security platform support, you also have seen fragmentation in terms of capabilities. So you had dedicated classification vendors, dedicated authentication vendors, dedicated authorization vendors, but really no vendor that does it all. And the problem starts with when you try to apply policies. So let's say you classified all your data. Now you're trying to apply policies. While that seems trivial on the surface, it's actually really hard if you're working with a dedicated classification engine because, maybe the classification is not updated in real time. What they care about is creating an inventory. Not necessarily it's easy to go and tie that into an actual policy. Maybe the locations of the data as they're stored with this inventory versus how they're actually stored in a database is different. That becomes a challenge. So the other thing we have to solve is really putting everything together: classification, access management, just-in-time access, masking, policy enforcement, auditing. It's all combined, allowing you to leverage each piece of the system for any other task. So you can look at the audit and create a policy. You can look at the classification and generate an access control rule for a specific user. So that's the second part. And the third part is really more of the human interface. So with a lot of organizations, they're really challenged with the fact that the data problem is multi-dimensional problem. It's not just security that can solve it. They need the data team, they need the IT team, they need the analyst. They're all they need compliance, privacy. It's a very complex problem. Now, if you're delivering a tool that fits only one entity, then you're doomed to fail. So security becomes a bottleneck, or compliance becomes a bottleneck, or what have you. So being able to actually think really hard about who needs to do what and what is their role within this mission of protecting data and doing that effectively, and then having each one with their own tool set that fits their mission has been the third things that we've done. When you have that, it's really hard to build, but that's what we did over the past 6 years. When you have that, you have really, really good coverage, and you can cover all the assets. You can address the security challenge across the entire life cycle of data and have all the capabilities combined. And you have tailored your experience and interface for each one of the users and administrators separately. That's where the business really, really wins. And that's where security, data security specifically, moves from being a constraint, a static constraint, to actually a dynamic enabler. So it moves with your business. It can adapt to what your business needs are at that specific point. Thing that come into life within our customers has been really a great experience. So I know I went for long. Sorry if I kind of deviated a bit from your question, but I think understanding what you really need to solve to get really good data security in an effective way is important.
I love it. In fact, I love the punchline right there that you had, Eldad, which is having a dynamic strategy for a static constraint. I think we could definitely use that as a tagline going forward too. But having said that, especially given your rich experience having, co-founded Satori, and your experience having talked to various personas in this space, if you were in a conversation with a CISO that's just about getting started in recalibrating their data governance strategy, what would be your top 3 takeaways for that? Just 1, 2, 3. What would that look like?
I found something that is pretty has a pretty good success ratio in terms of how you run the project, and but it's a bit counterintuitive. So what I tell CISOs is, listen, you have all this pressure from the business to implement data security. Maybe there's an audit finding that happens. You have an audit finding. You have a deadline till the end of the year to solve it, and you're kind of scrambling to make it work. And what you really want to do is start deploying and start having these specific capabilities that you need, like classification, like access controls, like masking, implemented. My advice, whether you're under that pressure or not, is instead of thinking horizontally, meaning think about each one of these capabilities and start implementing across the enterprise, actually thinking vertically. So instead of having a classification project followed by an access control project followed by a policy enforcement project, actually choose one use case. And I've seen this unfold in a very interesting way. Choose one use case, one team, one application, one type of data, and don't implement it in layers. Actually go deep. And make sure that you have all the set of capabilities and your vision for data security organization implemented for that specific use case, kind of end to end. So again, that's what I mean when I say vertically. And the reason this is so important in my eyes is because eventually the experience that data users have when they're interacting with data is so important. That's the most important thing. I always tell CISOs, if at the end of the day, our customers, my customers, and also your customers are the data users. If they're having a hard time accessing data, if they're not getting what they need, then they're going to go around it. But if you can prove you can generate an effective data security program while giving those end users a great experience, then that's it. That's one victory that's going to be followed by many victories within the organization. The way that translated, by the way, to our roadmap is we built a lot of capabilities, not for just the security administrator, but actually for the data users. A data access portal, all the APIs, the workflows for you to go and access data, your ability to request data self-service without going and opening a ticket, all these things, while not necessarily there's like tangible security value, the ability to make it easy for the organization to interact with data is really important. So my advice to, if I want to sum it up, choose one use case and solve it really, really well versus try to do it horizontally. And then the other piece, which we kind of touched on previously, is make sure that your choice of vendor and technology can support what you need now, but can also support what you need in the future. So let's say you have, and I've seen it a lot, you have your main use case is Snowflake, and you're trying to solve for that. And there's like this perfect vendor that works only with Snowflake, and it's tailored, and that's great. And, they have what you need. That's great and can work for a while. But at the same velocity that you chose Snowflake, you might choose a different vendor. And it is a fast-moving field, the data and AI, and things are happening in extremely dynamic way. So I would encourage people to actually think about as I said, coverage, and then data lifecycle, and the actual personas, and just make sure that take as a given those would change and evolve. Make sure the vendor you're choosing actually can support you as you evolve. So that's my second kind of advice for CISOs.
Thank you so much, Eldad, for your insightful discussion here. I think the most important takeaway, especially for me, was the fact that we were able to double click on AI usage and trust in data access, which traditionally has been perceived to be mutually exclusive. But I think they are both possible and essential pieces, and to a large degree are even intertwined. So this discussion has been immensely helpful for me, and I'm sure it is for our audience too.
Thank you so much. It was great being here today.
For our larger audience, stay tuned in the coming months as we bring in more information, more insights, and more content on our website, Commvault.com, on how we deliver comprehensive cyber resilience for continuous business. Thank you.